Your 2024 Fighting Illini are headed to the Citrus Bowl.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. My name is Sunny Verma. You can find me at IlliniCast. You can find me at the Sunny V. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Go ahead and look over there right in that bottom corner. Make sure you're subscribed because, again, anytime Illinois news breaks, I'll be right here breaking it down for you. We can talk together. Speaking of which, we do have some breaking news today. So I figured, not breaking, we all knew news would break. I guess it's just the details of the news that we were awaiting on. But before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This show is being done live because, again, it's a rapid reaction. I want to get your guys' thoughts. So definitely let me know in the comments section what you think of Illinois going to the Citrus Bowl against the South Carolina Gamecocks. I'll be honest, when Brett McMurphy originally broke the news, I want to say about an hour ago, I kind of wanted to wait and see because South Carolina, for me, was my third choice in this matchup. The reason being is, okay, you have Alabama and you have Ole Miss, and then, of course, South Carolina. Those were the three main teams that most of the projections had Illinois going up against. Alabama, it's Alabama, right? For years, any college program, whenever they have any sort of wins, we always say in jest, we want Bama. We want Bama. And, it's one of those where obviously this is not the Alabama of yesteryear, but still, it would have been cool to go up against such a historic program. And I'll save another thought for when I'm done talking about the next opponent, Ole Miss. Ole Miss was another opponent where, they're fun to watch. There's a lot of storylines between Luke Altmaier and them. And the Brett Bielema and Lane Kiffin back and forth that they've been going on via Twitter. I actually thought that maybe it was going to be South Carolina that Illinois was going to be matched up with, just because people who put these things together, they tend to love these sort of storylines. And lastly, then it's South Carolina, who we ultimately ended up with, a team that, they're a good football team. Don't get me wrong. Their only three losses were to ranked opponents at the time in LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama. So why am I kind of disappointed with this? Like, playing Alabama isn't necessarily meaning you're playing Alabama that everyone else played, right? It would have been underwhelming for a lot of the recruits there, a lot of the players there. When you go to Alabama, you want to win a playoff game. You want to participate in the playoffs. And so when that wasn't happening, the lineup that I'm expecting them to play in whichever bowl game they automatically end up in is, you're talking about second stringers, third stringers. I'm not being a negative Nancy here, but Illinois at full strength is not probably going to beat an Alabama team at full strength. They're probably not going to beat an Ole Miss team at full strength. Those two SEC teams have a lot of 4-star, and in Alabama's case, 5-star talent. But still, it would have been fun to see, and it probably would have been more even matchup. And with the likelihood of Illinois coming out on top, on winning. And how cool would it have been to say you beat Alabama? Remember in 2024 when we beat Alabama or Ole Miss? South Carolina is a little bit different because between these three teams, they're probably the one team that's going to play most of its starters. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be like, good, this is what we want. We want to play the best and all that. And I get your point. And truth be told, Illinois versus South Carolina is probably going to be the best product on the field in Orlando. South Carolina was 9-3. 5-3 in the SEC. They finished 6th And their best win was against number 12 Clemson. Thank you for the Armchair Illini folks for making this information easy for me to find on their website. South Carolina's a good football team. Shane Beamer's a very solid coach. And the difference is if Alabama had been playing or Ole Miss had been playing against Illinois, I think there would be a chance that they'd be kind of underwhelmed and not put forth as much effort into winning this game. South Carolina's going to put out their best players. Now, of course, you're going to have opt-outs. But with, again, Bama and Ole Miss, you would have had mass opt-outs. Whereas South Carolina, it's going to be similar to Illinois, right? For Illinois, we already have Pat Bryant signaling that he's not going to play in the bowl game. He's going to be focused on the NFL. And I talked about that in an episode this past week. I fully support that decision. He should. I do think he can do more value. He brings more value going into the NFL, hopefully being a high draft pick, making a lot of money. And, maybe, his loyalty to the university, he can come back and make some donations, help us with facilities. And with Brett, it helps in recruiting moving forward when it comes to future wide receivers, saying, hey, look, this is what we do. We place wide receivers into the draft. They do really well. And why don't you come here and be the next guy? And South Carolina, I'll be honest, my attention is almost solely focused on the Big Ten Conference because that's who pays me. And that's what I'm paid to know and understand and relay to you guys. So I don't know much about South Carolina outside what all of you can Google. So this is not going to be the Citrus Bowl preview by any stretch of the imagination. We'll have that later as the game gets closer. But again, quality-wise, this is probably the best version of the Citrus Bowl that we're going to get this year. For the Citrus Bowl, it's probably great because this is going to be a good bowl game. It's going to be two teams who both want to win it. This is not a disappointment on either side. Again, if Bama had gotten to the Citrus Bowl, they would do reluctantly. They don't necessarily want to be there, which is why I'm talking about the idea of an Illinois upset would be arguably greater against Alabama than it would be against South Carolina. I'm very curious to see what the Vegas line is going to be. And if it's out already, again, I went live as soon as this news became official, so I haven't seen. If it's live already, please let me know in the comments, in the chat, whatever it might be. But all in all, it's a Citrus Bowl, right? If you had told all of us at the beginning of the season that Illinois would be going to the Citrus Bowl, I would have thought you were crazy. There's no way. I in a good scenario, I'm like, oh, did we win 7 games? Which decent bowl are we going to play in mid-December? Citrus Bowl. If you told me Citrus Bowl, I would have oh wait, did they lose their affiliation or something? Isn't that supposed to go to the top Big Ten team and top SEC team that doesn't make the college football playoff? I must have missed some news saying that they've readjusted and that Citrus Bowl has, fallen down in the rankings. But that's not the case. We are going to a very good bowl game, arguably the best bowl game that doesn't involve the college football playoff. So even if ultimately we might be disappointed, and it might just be me. Again, this is a rapid reaction episode, right? You guys might all be late, and if you are, let me know. Again, you feel free to let me know if you agree or disagree. These are just my initial impressions. Even if we got the third choice of the 3 that were possibilities, we clearly got the number 1 choice when it comes to the bowl game, outside being the CFP, which obviously we knew we weren't going to make ever since we lost to Minnesota. But regardless, Citrus Bowl, Orlando, it's going to be a fun time. I believe the game's on New Year's Eve. So, going to Florida in December isn't the worst idea in the world. Let me know how many of you are planning on going. And I did want to say right after this, I'm going to be talking about, so I rewatched that Northwestern game. And you know what? I have a couple more thoughts on that right after this. So it's been about 48 hours since the conclusion of Illinois and Northwestern. And I hope a bunch of us had some time to kind of take these couple days and settle down a bit. I know the chat post-game, which, by the way, a lot of you are in. If you haven't joined us in our post-game chats yet, please do. I do one for every game, basketball or football. People were emotional, right? People understood. Some people were calling it a horrible loss. People were not happy, and I understand it's never feels good to lose to Northwestern, right? Little baby brother. The team in Northwestern itself is not really considered a Big Ten contender this year, but regardless, it just seems that every time we play at Welsh Ryan Arena, the games are close or they go to overtime. And recently, at least more often than not, we come out on the losing end. I did get to rewatch the game as I talked to my folks in the Discord. I believe last night I talked to them about this. By the way, link in the description if you want to join. We talk Illinois sports and sports in general all day, every day. And I talked to them, and I did rewatch the game. And again, with 2 minutes left, Illinois was up 5 points. Will Riley, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, took a very wild three-pointer that Will Riley usually takes. That's the type of shot Will does tend to take, but usually it's not in a crucial moment like that. So it wasn't a very good shot. In fact, it was a very bad shot. And it was only outdone by the following play, where Will for some just made an awful foul for no reason when it wasn't necessary at all. Northwestern got some points back there, and then the following play, Kylan Boswell just misses a layup. It was a flat-out layup. Easy layup. A layup that I am confident he makes 99 out of 100 times. And that's the game, essentially. The game went to overtime. I mean, you could have won the game right there, but you didn't. So really, now that I reflect on everything that I watched, I know it's a bummer, and I don't feel any better about the loss. But again, this is kind of the loss which I'm kind of glad we went through now, earlier on in the season. I think this is a game that, when you consider the circumstances, up 5, just a couple minutes left, our percentage to win, the probability was probably in the 70%, 80%. And then we had some, granted, very dumb plays and just a missed layup that ultimately, I think, cost us the game. I don't think that's going to constantly happen. So the positive spin, I guess I'm trying to put on it right now, is that, again, this young group went into a hostile environment in a rivalry game, played a very close matchup against a pretty talented team. Again, I don't think they're a Big Ten contender, but I think the Big Ten has a lot of decent teams in it. And it went through to the end. Remember, Northwestern beat an Elite 8 team last year, a veteran Illinois team. So it's not like this was one of those where we never lose to Northwestern. No, even our team last year, which was very good, in my opinion, one of the 5 best teams in the country, a Final Four team if we didn't have to play UConn in the Elite 8. That team lost to Northwestern. This team, much younger, a lot more roster turnover, went to the final couple minutes, and honestly, just a couple fluke plays came out on the short end. So I don't like losing, but I do think that there's lessons to be learned from the game tape here. A lot of these guys are going to reflect on themselves in the locker room. Brad's going to talk to them. Speaking of Brad, let's talk about Brad. Obviously, the main theme, and this coming from me also, the main frustrations were on Ben Hummerkaus, who, despite only shooting 1 for 9, played 38 minutes. And a lot of us were calling for him to be benched. The guy, he wasn't providing anything on the offensive end. And if he's not providing anything on the offensive end, then he's a negative on the team, because you saw another part of Northwestern's comeback revolved around Northwestern's best players singling out Ben Hummerkaus and scoring on him. So Brad was asked about this after the game. Of course he was, because we have some fantastic journalists covering the Illini. And Brad had this to say. If you think I'm going to take a guy out because he misses a couple jump shots, I'm not. Hummerkaus was shooting 43% from three before this game. And again, now the longer I've thought about it, and again, let me know in the comments whether you disagree with this or agree with this. This is why we love Brad Underwood, right? I think I've said this over the last couple of years. Those of you who joined me on the Locked On journey, you have heard me say this since the show started. I don't think Brad Underwood, for the most part, puts too much emphasis anymore on the regular season. Maybe I rephrase that. Of course, he cares about the regular season, but he knows his ultimate goal is to win the national championship. Before, I think it was escaping the first weekend, getting to the Sweet 16, just because of his inability to do that before, and the whispers starting, the Brad Underwood's haters, coming out every year seemingly in March. But I think Brad now has more of a long-term goal. He doesn't just want to make the tournament. He doesn't just want to get a high seed. I think genuinely now he wants to win the tournament. And I think he recognizes that for this team, which has an immense ceiling, and I still believe that, for this team to win a national championship, you are going to need Ben Hummerkaus. You are going to need that shooting. And if anything, this press conference was one of those moments where, as a player, if I'm Ben Hummerkaus and I hear my coach have my back the way Brad did, and just basically tell the world how much he trusts me. Ben felt bad after that game, right? These kids, they all have social media. They all have friends. They know that the spotlight was on him. He knows that. And he knows he couldn't have felt good about 1 for 9. But then Brad says what he says. I'm going to make a prediction. And all 3 of my predictions for this Northwestern game were wrong. So maybe my predictions really aren't worth anything. But I think Ben might have a bounce back game against Wisconsin this week. I just think this kind of relationship that Brad develops with his players is good for the team in the long run. It's a bummer we lost this game on a Friday night in December against Northwestern. But I think the ultimate purpose is for Brad recognizing what it's going to take for this team to win on a Thursday night, on a Friday night in March. And for that, I think he realizes he needs Ben Hummerkaus. Now, that doesn't mean I'm completely okay with his game planning on Friday. If this were a tournament game and he kept Ben in that long for 38 minutes when he was obviously a 0, I think that's what we're, for the most part, afraid of. Because that's just kind of the thing he does. He did it against UConn, right? In the Elite 8 that I mentioned earlier. He just kept going at Klingen. I understand that was the game plan. Let's maybe get Klingen in foul trouble. But it was clearly not working. And Brad Underwood has a history of just being too late on his in-game adjustments. And so that's my fear about this, right? I don't mind if ultimately, now that I've had time to think about it, is he kept Ben in because he knows, hey, we're still leading. We're still winning. We have an opportunity to beat this Northwestern team in Welsh Ryan Arena. And I think he'll find his shot. Because, again, ultimately, we want Ben Hummerkaus to play to what we think he can play at. But if this is happening in the round of 32 or the Sweet 16, and Ben is just not hitting shots, I think Brad needs to understand, needs to know that, hey, this is do or die. This isn't a conference game in December. This is the season. And we all know that's kind of Brad's biggest flaw, I would say, is sometimes he gets too stubborn. So that's where I stand right now. Right now, I'm at the point where I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because if long-term he recognizes that he needs to keep Ben's confidence up, especially this early in the season, guys, this is only one game into the Big Ten season, then fine. I'll understand why he played so much against Northwestern. But I want to know that Brad will learn too. That, early on in the season, in these sort of games, fine, maybe. But as the season progresses, we want to make sure we get the wins we need to win and get a higher seed. And ultimately, when we play in those games that really do matter, that Brad will have learned from this. Otherwise, it was all for naught. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so again, news. Illinois versus South Carolina. You just got my thoughts on the Northwestern game, which I got to rewatch. We're going to have a quick turnaround. We have Wisconsin in just a couple days. I'll have a preview out for that. Hopefully I'll have a Wisconsin guy come on and give us a little bit more insight onto the Badgers roster. I'll get in more details later, but I do think this is a team that we can beat. Our strengths, meaning Visic and Morez, could be weaknesses that the Wisconsin Badgers are going to have struggle playing against. Some of your comments. Jackson says, "What's up, Fighting Illini Nation?" Jackson, always so nice to have you around. Santi says, "Sonny, are you going to the Citrus Bowl? South Carolina is going to be a competitive opponent." Tickets were just released. I actually just put it in the chat too. So if you are going, make sure you submit your information so that you have that opportunity. I don't know yet. I didn't want to jinx anything. I need to figure out details and see if I can make it. I forget where the comment went. Thomas, there you go. Tom says, "Looking like a great place to watch an Illinois football game in someplace warm." Totally agree. I totally agree. So we'll see. Lee says he's buying his tickets now. Philip says the Citrus Bowl was the first bowl game Brett Bielema went to as a head coach in 2006. I did not know that. Thanks for that, Philip. I'm sure that's going to be brought up in one of the press conferences that Brett's going to have talking about the game. I did throw in the link to our Discord if you want to join us for a conversation. Philip says South Carolina quarterback Lenore Sellers is a freshman. He will make mistakes. Good to know again, Philip. Again, I don't know much about this roster. I don't yet. If we were matched up in a Big Ten game, of course, we can go over the positives and negatives, but a lot of my focus is on the Big Ten Conference. I don't know much about the SEC and the other inferior conferences. Keep Chop and says, "So proud of the Illini. Will represent the Big Ten well." I think so. I think so too. We're not going to have a lot of opt-outs. We'll go over a list of, some potential ones later on this week, but I think we'll be good. Philip echoes what I kind of said in the last segment, so I hope he agrees with me. He says, the Illini basketball team, we want them to peak in February and March, not early December. Lee says, we need Hummerhouse because of Brad's recruiting. He has no choice but to go with Ben. Ultimately, it's still on Brad's head for the questionable recruiting. Questionable as of now, Lee, right? I mean, it could still change. And again, my feeling, just to wrap it up, just seems like maybe he's watched enough Ben Hummerhouse and Kerry Booth in practice. And obviously, Ben's a good practice player. We know that part. But he realizes that, Ben is the guy that they're going to need more than anyone else in order to reach what the ceiling of this basketball team is. And, it's hard for me to argue that. And what is the ceiling? That's to be argued. I'm a lot higher on them now than I was in the offseason, but that's just one of those things that we shall see. It's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Breaking news episode of Locked On Illini. Again, I'll be here today, tomorrow, every single day. So please, all I ask in return is make sure you hit that like button for me. Somewhere down there, just hit that thumbs up. It costs you guys nothing, but it really sends this news like this to other fellow Illini fans, and it helps me build my community here at Locked On Illini. It's my goal to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the calendar year. It's going to be daunting. I'm not sure if I can do it, but I believe in you guys and the support that you guys have always shown me. That's going to wrap it up. On Monday's episode, I'm going to be talking about Luke Altmaier's quotes to a reporter the other day about his not really, how do I phrase this? Maybe non-committal that he was going to 100% be back in an Illini uniform on Monday, which I said last week. And some people, take a look at the comment section of that transfer portal video. People got really upset with me when I'm just telling you what I hear. I would never make anything up right off the bat, but I'm going to get more in depth with that on Monday. Until then, ILL, love you guys.